You're listening to the Thoughts for Living podcast. I wonder what it is. Coming to you from the birthplace of the Civil Rights Movement, Montgomery, Alabama. Hello, and welcome again to the Thoughts for Living podcast. We're so glad that you have taken time out of your day to join us once again for a conversation that would help us better understand how environment impacts our consciousness and how our consciousness impacts our culture and how these influence our decision making. We hope all is well with you and yours. In today's episode, we're titling it Dog Whistles, Name Calling, and the Judge Ketanji Brown Hearings. Dog Whistles, Name Calling, and the Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson Hearings. In this episode of Thoughts for Living, we'd like to return to an issue we somewhat discussed in a previous episode on critical race theory and voter suppression. You can read the white paper in your leisure at thoughtsforliving.com, in which we suggested that the attacks on CRT and the 1619 Project were being used by supremacist Republican operatives as dog whistles to alert their white supremacist fan base to not only demand a white Eurocentric perspective of American history be taught in pre-K through 12 public schools, but also to support voter suppression tactics based on the lie that the 2020 presidential election was stolen from the former president, Trump. At that time, we just touched on the subject of dog whistles, but in light of the attacks that we have witnessed on the outstanding Supreme Court nominee, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, and the coded language several Republican senators used to reinforce not only the anti-Black crowd's brainwashing relative to critical race theory, but also their support of QAnon conspiracy theories. We thought it necessary to discuss this topic in the current context using, as usual, ecological consciousness theory. Now, many of us watched with great pride as Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, through her examination for a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court of the United States, helped to enrich our understanding about the role of judges and the Congress in lawmaking and sentencing. But I must say, we were also angered by the racist and disrespectful conduct of many Republican senators, including Hawley, Cruz, Cotton, Blackburn, Lee, and Graham, to name a few, in their regurgitation of racialized falsehoods concerning critical race theory and child pornography. Rather than talk about the specific lies that undergirded not only their questions, but the disrespect and the palpable disdain they demonstrated toward Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, who clearly exhibited a humanity that outshone her vile detractors, we will try to discuss the ecological context that has fomented the issues they attempted to use to stop her ascension to the court. Why is it, of all the issues surrounding jurisprudence, did the Republican senatorial hit team choose critical race theory as one main line of questioning? The same question could be asked relative to thousands of cases Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson has adjudicated. Why ask the judge about child pornography? I don't recall these questions being the main focus of the Republican senators during the Kavanaugh or Barrett examinations. Viewed through ecological consciousness theory, we have posited that Republican political propagandists frame critical race theory as well as the 1619 Project as dog whistles. You know, when you blow a dog whistle, most of humanity cannot hear the ultrasonic frequency. Also, the silent whistle is used in mostly training dogs. Similarly, dog whistle politics uses coded language and terms to get people who know what these coded terms and language mean to move collectively on an issue. So, in a society built and organized on white supremacy, segregated by ethnicity, gender, and class, where for centuries everything associated with black people and blackness generally is bad, like public schools are bad, like public health care is bad, like governmental assistance is bad, and even the federal government has been painted black, so it's bad. And as opposed to where private schools and universities, they're good. Homeschooling, good. Private health care, that's good. Private business and corporations, also good. States' rights, good. And local control of housing and zoning, that's good as well. And they're generally characterized, anything that's good is characterized as white or white control is good. Then words like welfare mean black, even though most of the recipients of governmental welfare are white. So we can see how over time these narratives and these terms have been developed to now they are used as dog whistles to get the attention of their listeners. For example, Lee Atwater, a South Carolina Republican operative and former Republican National Committee chairman, gave an interview in which he stated, and I quote, "You start out in 1954 by saying N-word, N-word, N-word. By 1968, you can't say N-word. That hurts you. It backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff, and you're getting so abstract." He goes on to say, now you're talking about cutting taxes, and all these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and a byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. We want to cut this is much more abstract than even the busing thing, and a hell of a lot more abstract than N-word, N-word, unquote. For more information about this, you can go to thoughtsforliving.com and click on intellectual work, and then scroll down to critical race theory and voter suppression, and you will find links to these statements that were made by Lee Atwater. So we can see that CRT, critical race theory, is being used as code for black to get white supremacists and their allies to ban CRT and anything they call CRT from being used in pre-K through 12th grade public schools, even though critical race theory is not taught in these schools. Many of these same people also understand the meaning of the issue of child pornography through their belief in QAnon. As Amy Davison Sorkin wrote in The New Yorker, quote, as it happens, sexual abuse of children, her words, is one of the key themes in the QAnon family of conspiracy theories, as Cruz and his fellow Republicans certainly know. End of quote. Stephen J. Harper, writing for Common Dreams, states that, and I quote, QAnon is an anonymous website that became an internet sensation in 2017. One of its core beliefs is that a group, listen to this, of Satan-worshiping elites run a child sex ring, and they are trying to control U.S. politics and media. Unquote. Now, some of you may remember, I think a year or two ago, there was a European American male who was arrested at a pizza shop because he had told law enforcement he had come to try to rescue some of the children that had supposedly been kidnapped and were being held in the pizza shop. This is the kind of insanity that is being accepted as truth. And if that were not enough, even more bizarre, it's been reported this week that Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas' wife, Jenny Thomas, shared texts with Trump's administration chief of staff, Mark Meadows, that revealed she was, and I quote, deeply enmeshed in Donald Trump's attempt to overturn the 2020 presidential election, according to Jeremy Stahl in an article written for Slate. Included in the Slate article, Mrs. Thomas alluded to, and I quote, a white hat sting operation in 12 key battleground states in a text to the White House Chief of Staff, in which she was referring to a theory that the Trump administration, get this, secretly watermarked millions of ballots in order to catch the Democrats in the act of stealing the election. So this is what the code meant, white hat sting operation. Now, if you weren't aware of this narrative, you wouldn't know what she was talking about. But those who are QAnon followers knew exactly what she was talking about. And this is what she was texting to Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, during the Trump administration. So now we can see how these Republican operatives, including the wife of a Supreme Court justice, are really using these ideas as dog whistles to get people to support an insurrection of the Capitol, to somehow reinstall Trump, to ban critical race theory, to support voter suppression, and to attempt to derail Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's appointment to the Supreme Court. Now, I tell you, it was all I could do to keep my composure when watching how these Republicans use these dog whistles, and not only use these dog whistles of using critical race theory and trying to use child pornography, because they knew that these were two issues that their supremacist voters who supported the former administration knew that language and that those terms would get them riled up and would get them in such a state that they would be willing, as you saw, to go to, as you have seen, to go to boards of education and to demand that critical race theory not be taught in schools, even though it's not taught in schools, and to use the dog whistle of child pornography, because there are many in QAnon, most people who accept that insane belief system believe that there's a cabal of and obviously, evidently, the people must be just Democrats. There are no Republicans involved in this elite child sex ring, right? That's trying to take over the country, and to watch them hide behind these dog whistles while just totally being disrespectful to Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. It was all I could do to hold my peace. I've never seen such disrespect in a public forum such as that of a highly qualified and should have been unquestioned candidate for the Supreme Court. Now, thankfully, there were Democrats who posed questions that really allowed Judge Jackson to educate the citizenry here in the United States and those global citizens who were watching from abroad about the workings of the judicial system in the United States, how it is Congress's responsibility and role to establish the laws and the policies to which judges had to use in developing their recommendations for sentencing. And obviously, Judge Brown could not respond as Kavanaugh had under pressure. When Kavanaugh was a nominee, he couldn't take the pressure of the examination and said all types of things, including calling the hearing a pejorative, and talking back to the senators who had asked him questions about his alcohol usage. Had Judge Brown even made any statement beyond what she did, they would have found reason to stop or block her nomination, even as they tried to undermine her. Her integrity, undermined her integrity as a judge who was already on the federal bench, tried to undermine her integrity as an African-American female mother and wife. But thanks be to God, she maintained her composure under the racist assault put upon her by these Republican supremacists and operatives who were simply using the hearing and examination as an opportunity to continue to speak to those of their supporters who are accepting insane ideologies and falsehoods and making decisions based on false information. They're making decisions based on lies, and we dare say QAnon based on a false reality and insanity. It was really, really, had it not been for those few Democrats who tried to ask questions that were to the heart of her role as a judge and to the heart of what her role would be if placed on the bench of the Supreme Court, those questions actually allow an opportunity for Judge Brown to eloquently describe the relationship of the Congress to the court. And she did it in such a way that any listener without any kind of training in law could understand clearly what she was saying. And even when she was making just outstanding responses to really crazy questioning, she was doing her best, then they would cut her off and not allow her to finish her response. It was good when she finally had gotten to a place where she had probably had enough. But she had to respond to one senator to let them know that what he was asking was not the role of a judge, but it was an issue that Congress needed to address. So much so that Dick Durbin, to his credit, even echoed her statement. I think he was speaking to Lindsey Graham, that the enhancements and the policies that Congress had issued needed to be updated if they wanted better results from the adjudication processes that judges were involved in. So we can see in summation, we believe leadership is the responsibility of all. Leadership is the responsibility of all. And these Republican supremacists should know what they were engaged in during the hearings was wrong, because their examination was based on falsehoods. They failed, in my opinion, in their role as elective representatives. Now, the question is, why can't they tell their voters, their supporters, those to whom they were blowing the political dog whistles to, that their beliefs are unfounded? Ecological consciousness theory asserts that their position and status are more important to those Republican operatives than honesty or integrity. Upholding white supremacist values of individualism, not the nation, upholding competition, rather than collaboration. These political operatives saw it more important to hold up whiteness, idolatry, rather than spirituality. And they were certainly more interested in their own personal achievement as opposed to representing personhood. Irregardless of the outcome, I suggest this is the rot of our nation. So let me pull this tooth. White racism, white supremacy is like a cavity, poisoning the entire body. Racism, white supremacy is like a cavity, and it's poisoning the entire nation, the entire body of this nation. It's also like spoiled fruit or vegetables in a refrigerator. I'm sure many of you know that if you put a piece of fresh fruit next to a piece of spoiled fruit, that fresh fruit won't make spoiled fruit fresh. But spoiled fruit will turn fresh fruit bad. And this is racism in our country. Racism, white supremacy makes everything it comes in contact with bad. It spoils everything it comes in contact with. And putting good people, supposedly, into white supremacy won't turn white supremacy good. But racism, white supremacy will turn decent people bad. You've been listening to the Thoughts for a Living podcast